welcome everybody today to the Scale Passion e-interview series. I'm talking today with a trusted friend and mentor, David Axson. He and I go way back. These days, David is an author and a consultant. He wrote a great book, a big, thick book, if you really want to go deep, on best practices in planning and performance management, which is really a standard when it comes to the idea of best practices. And he's also got a new book coming out next year called Management Mythbusters, and I'm excited to get my hands on that. I truly respect David in a big, big way. And the reason we're talking to him today is because way back when he started a company called the Hackett Group, and was able to really build that company into a wonderful company that's still around today. It was actually purchased by a company called AnswerThink, and that's where David and I met. We both worked for AnswerThink for quite some time. I thought it would be really interesting to talk to David today about the growth of the Hackett Group, and within that, we could also talk about the context of best practices and what it means. So welcome, David. Good to see you.
Thanks, Robert. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's always good to catch up with you. Let's start off with your history, maybe a little bit about you building up to the Hackett Group, and then if you would tell us about the growth of the Hackett Group and when you started it and how that grew and all the way to selling it to AnswerThink.
Okay. As you can probably guess, I'm not a native of this land. I grew up in England, in the north of England. Got a degree in accountancy and computer science, and then started working in London in the early 1980s. Initially, I started working in banking, but rapidly found out that was going to be a fairly boring life for me. So I moved into consulting with the what was then one of the big eight, Deloitte Haskins and Sells. Spent about 5 years there working in computer systems consulting and financial consulting of the finance organization, not investing. And then was headhunted by an American consulting firm called A.T. Kearney. And in fact, the story of the Hackett Group really begins almost exactly 20 years ago this week. I was working at Kearney in the London office, primarily engaged in banking, financial institutions work with a fairly heavy emphasis on technology. And I was assigned to a project in New York, actually working for a UK bank, consulting to a UK bank in New York City. And so I flew over to the States, spent about 12 weeks working over here. And while on that assignment, the lead from A.T. Kearney was a gentleman by the name of Greg Hackett, who was based out of the Cleveland office of A.T. Kearney here in Ohio, where I'm talking to you from today. And we got friendly over many, many beers and a lot of very bad burgers and a memorable weekend at the Indy 500.
The life of a consultant, right?
It was truly exciting, and the waistline expanded suitably, and it's not stopped in the last 20 years. Well, Greg and I hit it off for whatever reason, and we stayed in touch. And about 18 months later, I was over in the States on vacation, actually, with my wife. And we met up in Washington National Airport. I remember it very clearly. And Greg said, I'm going to be leaving Kearney to set up my own business. Do you want to come and help me do that? This was in about May, June of 1991. I said, yeah, okay, sounds like a good idea. So I quit my job, bought a one-way plane ticket, and by the end of September, I was sleeping in a motel in Aurora, Ohio. What the heck I'd done. Left my wife behind in our house in England. And literally, the Hackett Group was 3 guys in the back room of a real estate agency just off Main Street in Hudson, Ohio. The idea was, in 1991, the economy was in recession. Sounds awfully familiar. We were just beginning to see the green shoots of that particular recession ending. And while at A.T. Kearney, both Greg and I have been fairly heavily involved in benchmarking corporate performance, looking at the comparative cost structures, efficiency and effectiveness of different business processes and functions across different organizations, both in Europe and over here in the United States. And we saw an opportunity here. Well, more initially, Greg saw the opportunity to make this into a business. Kearney didn't want to do that, so we decided to go out on our own and do it, along with a third gentleman who was a former corporate controller down at one of EDS's divisions down in Plano, Texas. And the 3 of us really sat in the back room of this real estate agency and said, what are we going to do now? The cool thing about it was we were basically client funded. On leaving A.T. Kearney, each of us was able to bring a client with us. These were clients that we were working with while at A.T. Kearney who bought in to what we were trying to accomplish. And each of these 3 clients made a commitment that if we were to leave and set up our own organization, they would continue to work with us. I can't tell you how valuable that was. to have that validation that what we were trying to do made sense. And these were all Fortune 100 companies. All three of them were Fortune 100 companies. In fact, the companies were Alcoa, Allied Signal, which is now Honeywell, and EDS, which was a very successful business at the time and has obviously now recently become part of Hewlett-Packard. And those three clients really got us started. We were doing consulting on financial process and organization. This was just about the time that Michael Hammer published the book with Jim Champy, Re-Engineering the Corporation. And it played very nicely into a recession/emerging growth play, where companies were really beginning to look at cost effectiveness and efficiency, trying to trim fat, but also trying to create scalable operations so that when the economy picked up, they were in a position to support the growth without necessarily adding all the cost. So we started off with just the three of us, with our three clients, and relatively early on in the process, probably January of 92, so we've been in business about 90 days by now. We sat down and said, look, just doing the consulting is not going to get us anywhere. There are a lot of single shingle consulting firms out there with bright people doing good work, but there's no real sustainability to it, and they're very dependent on the relationship of hours worked to revenue. So we sat down and we built a product. We created a finance benchmarking product which really allowed companies to look at their finance operation across 27 different processes. Everything as exciting as accounts payable, closing the books, filing the taxes, and doing the budgets. And I well remember early in February of 92, sitting there and cold calling the CFOs of the top 200 companies in America. I got through to 3 of them. I managed to sell 2 of them on the product.
Nice.
We were able to bring another 11 companies to the table through prior contacts, referrals from some of the companies we were doing business with. And so we started off with 13 companies. And that was how the benchmark started in early 1992. What I will tell you is by the time we sold the business, 5 years later, 5.5 years later, towards the end of 1997, there were close to 2,000 companies that had participated in our benchmark process. So for those 13 companies in early 92, we grew our client base to close to 2,000 companies in a little over 5 years. How did we do that? Well, some of it was luck. Some of it we were very smart. We were lucky. We were client funded. We made payroll every month when we started. We never borrowed a cent to fund the growth and the development of the company. We were able to do that by combining the benchmark product. We would sell a benchmark as a packaged product to a client. We knew what our cost to deliver that was, and our costs went down over time because obviously we got better at it, so we broke the relationship between revenue and hours worked. But by selling someone a benchmark, that basically it was a health check for companies. It was a health check for a CFO to say, how good, how fit is your finance organization? Those that didn't score too well, guess what? They had paid us to give us their data so that we could write them a proposal to help them realize